Now, maybe more than any book that I've ever read, I've read this book more times. I'm not sure if it's a few dozen between the physical book and constantly replaying the audiobook, but I tell you it's a lot. And one of the videos that I've made is about Dr. Joe Dispenza and his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and a thought experiment, a challenge, a story that he tells about his daughter and how he challenged her to test the power of her own mind, to test the power of consciousness, to test her ability to create her own personal reality. And when I read that, I loved it so much that I started doing what I now call a thought experiment. Don't just believe the videos that you watch, do a thought experiment. And so I started doing exactly what he had his daughter do. And I wanted to share that process in an incredible, insane manifestation story that happened for me as a result of using it. My name's Jake with JakeDucey.com. If you enjoy this video, hit the like button on it. Be sure to check out Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. If you've read it, let me know in the comments right there down below and where in the world you're coming from. And we'll see you on the other side. So I turned it into what I call a thought experiment from Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And the first step in my thought experiments that I started doing and getting these awesome results, which I'll tell you a really quite shocking and amazing story momentarily, but first is to pick an intention. And so in this section of the book, he is telling a story about his daughter who's in college and she wants to study abroad in Europe. And she asked if he would pay for it. And he's like, look, it's not that I'm not a supporting father, but I'd like to teach you about the power of your own mind. And so why don't we set the intention for you to attract an experience for all the expenses to get covered? And she's like, okay, that's a great idea. And he reminds her to pick an intention and a couple of the other topics that we're going to be discussing here in a moment. She comes back and she says, oh my gosh, I got this opportunity where half of all my expenses can get covered. Dad, can you cover the other half of it? And he's like, I thought our intention was you were gonna manifest a situation where all of it was covered. So why don't you go back to the drawing board? Then she comes back again and she ends up attracting that opportunity plus a job where she could get paid teaching English, I believe, to tourists. And then she would have a budget and available spending money. So on the weekends when she wasn't studying abroad, she could go travel all over Europe and do all these fun things. So it was even better than she originally planned. And it starts with picking an intention. Number two is mentally rehearse. And mentally rehearse is a term that Joe uses that I think is probably maybe even a better term than visualization or guided meditation, because in mentally rehearsing, you're not only creating a picture in your own imagination, but you're practicing being there, which means you're feeling it as if it was happening. You're mentally rehearsing an outcome in your own consciousness that hasn't occurred yet in this reality. And so he reminds his daughter, he says, when you are mentally rehearsing, remember, if you feel like the same person you were before the mental rehearsal, before that meditation, it didn't work. That the whole point of the mental rehearsal was to evoke a feeling, an emotion, activating our brain in new ways. And then that's when he talks about Hebb's law coming into play, that if you actually do these thought experiments regularly, you can use them as a game to activate neuroscience. What Joe Dispenza talks about is Hebb's law. And it's the cells in the brain that fire and wire together. They build together, they fire and wire together. So when we mentally rehearse and we feel different after the mental rehearsal, and his daughter would feel like excitement, like she just landed this incredible opportunity, even though it hadn't happened yet. And she's practicing that. And she's like, oh my gosh, I just got this opportunity for it all to be covered. but it still hasn't happened yet. And as she can build the vividness of that mental rehearsal more and more, then boom, she gets a breakthrough like that. And so that's what he's talking about when he means mental rehearsal. So third and finally is check if you feel different. So number 1, pick an intention. Number 2, mentally rehearse. And 3, check if you feel different from the mental rehearsal, because that means you're setting out intention. As Dr. Wayne Dyer would talk about, he would say, he wrote a book called The Power of Intention, Wayne Dyer did. And in that book, he explores the idea that intention isn't idle. It's a physical force in the universe. It's actually a physical force in the universe that connects to the quantum field. And that's why Bob Proctor, he says that thought waves are cosmic waves that penetrate all time and space. It's the same idea. So I can remember learning all this. I was probably 22 years old, and I was sitting on the bluff where I used to live when I used to live in California, which is a whole nother story. And I was sitting on the hill watching the ocean, and I would park my car there every day, and I would listen to the book over and over and over and over again. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. The audiobook's really good too, by the way. And I remember coming across those ideas, and then he caps this whole thought experiment off by saying that your personality creates your personal reality. So that mental rehearsal, when you check in to see if you feel different, that's what creates the emotion. That's what creates the physical force of intention. That's what creates the cosmic waves of energy that penetrate all time and space. That this memorized emotional pattern, this memorized vibration that we've come to know as us, our personality creates our personal reality. So he says, if you want to change your personal reality, you have to change your personality. You have to change who you are and how you feel about yourself in the world. And then, because the world is just an outer holographic projection or mirror, a mirror of consciousness that reflects back to us who we are, then we can change the outer world by changing ourselves, and we change ourselves by picking an intention, using mental rehearsal, and checking to see if we feel different. Okay, so now story time. I'm sitting there, I'm in my car, I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And I was like, okay, well, why don't I start calling it a thought experiment, and I gamify it. And I start picking different omens, because in this section of the book, when he's telling the story about his daughter, he's saying for you to challenge the power of intention. Don't just listen to these words. In Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, the reason that book did so well is because he practically challenges you to apply it into your life. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I'm not just gonna read his book about how his daughter did it. I'm gonna read it and then I'm gonna apply it. And I started picking little different things like that. And things started happening in major ways. And so what ended up happening was I was trying to attract someone in my life for a business opportunity. And I had been trying so hard. I had been calling them all the time like that. I'd be sending them text messages. I was trying to bring them into this opportunity many years ago. And I couldn't get it to work out. And the craziest thing happened, right? So I'm wondering why this isn't working. I'm like, come on, I thought this stuff works, Dr. Joe, I was about to call Dr. Phil instead of Dr. Joe and start telling him about my problems. And I was sitting there before a yoga class, reading the book, and I realized there was another part, and that was letting go of it. You feel like you've already have it. So then when you come back to this dimension, you're not worried about if you're going to get it or when you're going to get it or if it's even working. That doesn't happen. And so I let go of it. I go to this yoga class. I put my mat in the yoga class. Then I go back to the locker room. I kid you not, I'm walking with my head down before the yoga class, and I know not very spiritual of me to have my head down. And as I'm walking out of the yoga class, I turn and I open the door to the locker room. I walk in with my head down and I hit someone's shoulder and I'm like, excuse me, sorry. And we like both look at each other and we're like, excuse me, sorry. And I'm like, Brad? And he's like, Jake? And literally that's exactly what happened. And then we ended up hanging out afterwards, and it manifested like in such a eerie way. Not eerie isn't the word. Freaking awesome is the word. So I encourage you to do this thought experiment and set the intention, because intention is a physical force in the universe, to do this for some area of your life. It could be really small to start, and then just keep gamifying it. Because what Dr. Joe was teaching his daughter there was, I am not the source of your abundance. I love you and I'll help you as much with everything. But he was teaching her how to plug her outlet into the infinite universe instead of into dad to give her stuff. And she learned. She was like, what? I mean, imagine what would happen if you were 19 or 20 years old and you're doing that. And she's realizing how powerful her mind is. I realized how powerful my mind was, and I'm still realizing it on new levels every day by constantly doing new thought experiment games. So give this a try. Let me know in the comments right there down below if you're gonna be doing this exercise. Make sure you hit the like button on this video to send it out into the YouTube universe so more people see it. Be sure to check out Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and we'll see you next time.